welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about the fact that our lives should be such a reflection of God that others recognize Him in us and know that He is real. Let's go. Hey everybody, it's that Sunday School Girl of thatsundayschoolgirl.com. Welcome to the lesson for Sunday, November 25th. It is a Friday upload, the day after Thanksgiving. I hope that you had a wonderful time with your family and friends, enjoying a great meal, eating too much, and remembering God's great blessings toward us. It was a good day for me, and if you saw my earlier post, I said that after 3 pans of mac and cheese, 2 red velvet cakes, a lemon cake, the peach cobbler, pecan cobbler, I forget what else I'm leaving out, and hosting somewhere between 55 and 60 people here in my mother's home, I am with you and I'm excited to be reviewing this lesson. As a matter of fact, after I'm done, I will go in and start helping with the preparations because our family tradition is to bring out all of the leftovers today, and we will have a fish fry, and that will be our meat for the day. So family will come back over, another 40 or 50 people. It's going to be great. So I'm having a great weekend. I trust that you are too. Not sure if you're out Black Friday shopping or what this day does for you, but I pray that in your busyness of this weekend that you are making Sunday school a priority. If you're new around here, welcome. You have just joined the largest cyber community of Sunday school students on the World Wide Web. This is also the most thumbs up liked Sunday school review channel on YouTube. As a matter of fact, if you missed the great news on this past week, last week's video pushed us over, and to God be the glory, that Sunday School Girl has been viewed more than 1 million times around the world. It is a tremendous blessing to be here to share with you. I ask that you will do me a favor. First, make sure that you have clicked the subscribe button below. Make sure that you are connected to this community. And there's a second step to hit the notifications bell so that when new content is uploaded, it is sent immediately to your email and you are keeping up with everything. But God is blessing again. I am so honored that you're here. I am blessed by your presence, and you all encourage me as we study together. A couple of quick things as it relates to special items that are available on the website. You've heard me talking about the TSSG scarf for several weeks. I had a note come in this morning, says I can't order the scarf. That is because all of the inventory that I had on hand and that I know will be received this week has already sold out. But immediately following this video, I'm going to open orders back up. It's going to take about 2 weeks before I get those in hand and get those back out. This order that I will place on Monday will be the last order that I can guarantee before Christmas, because with printing time and shipping time, we have to account for all of that. So if you're interested, make sure that you go ahead and place your order. It is an amazing item. You've seen all the ways that it can be used, and I'm going to start posting pictures of people who have shared their photos back with me. I think that's really it. We have a very, very wonderful lesson this week. There's a lot of information in here. If you're like me, you may have gotten a later start, so hopefully this video is going to help you out quite a bit. And don't forget, your TSSG notes are available. The link is down below. Grab them, get your pens, your Bibles, your commentaries, your publisher's book, read the scriptures, and let's get into this lesson. Our lesson title is God Blesses Jacob and His Family. The Bible basis is Genesis chapter 30, verses 22 through 32 and 43. The Bible truth: God helped Jacob overcome seeming defeat by escaping the wrath of a selfish and deceptive father-in-law. Our memory verse is verse 22, and the lesson aim is that we will thank God for answering our prayers, understand that God acts in His own time, and accept that God helps others when He helps us. You already know from our title and from our past week's study that we are still talking about Jacob. We are no doubt dealing with a dysfunctional family, and there's a lot of conflict inside of it. There's also this recurring theme that we see of people always trying to help God out. And I don't know about you, but I've been guilty before of trying to figure out everything and sometimes putting together the pieces for myself. I can remember in 2003, I was laid off from my job, and although I was kind of doing some odd jobs and kind of making a little money here and there, it was not quite enough to take care of everything that I needed. And I went through my savings, and that held me for a while. But I was literally laid off for a total time period of almost 3 years, again, with being underemployed in between. And I remember getting one of those envelopes in the mail, and there was a check inside of it. It was close to $10,000. And if I would just sign the back of this check and go and cash it, I could have that amount of money. And in my mind, I just knew that if I went ahead and took this, what I know is a loan, and used it to pay the house note and to do all these kinds of things, that I would ultimately have the strategy down the road to pay it back. Well, fast forward in that story, and needless to say, that was a loan. In fact, I think the only loan that I've ever defaulted on. I'm not very big on credit and loans, but I learned a huge lesson. And if I didn't believe my own ideas about loans and credit, at that point, I certainly had my own experience to prove it. And so I learned that trying to figure out and fix things my way often caused more problems than it would if I just depended on God, trusted his promise, and known that he was faithful. Jacob and his family experienced some of the same. We are in this week the 30th chapter of the book of Genesis. And if you haven't figured it out, yes, I have a little cold too, so I'm working through that. I'm sorry. Verses 1 through 24, we see Jacob's home life. And in verses 25 through 43, we see Jacob at work. Again, we're in the midst of what seems to be a very crazy family dynamic, and there are bad personal choices from Jacob and other members of his family. But the one thing that is consistent is that God is there. He is always present. We know Jacob, our con artist, the trickster who stole his brother's birthright and ran to avoid his brother killing him. That was last week's lesson. He was to run to Haran, and he had an experience with God on his way. That's last week's lesson as well. And he called that place the house of God. We also know that from last week's lesson, he has made this move because his mother told him to go back to her hometown, back to a place where he would be among family. And he's told to go to his uncle Laban. He's also looking for a wife, and Laban has 2 daughters, and Isaac really thinks one of them is fantastic. He wants to marry her. He's got his eye on Rachel. And he worked 7 years. That was the arrangement with his uncle to have Rachel as his wife. And on the wedding night, the trickster gets tricked because he thought he was getting Rachel, which is the girl that he loved. But his uncle puts her sister, Leah, the Bible says she's the not so cute one, in the bedchamber that night. And so he goes to his uncle to defend the fact that that's not our deal. That's not who we worked for. And Laban explains that he basically defends his action in the name of the right of the firstborn. And that was the very thing that Jacob had tricked his twin brother out of, was the right of the firstborn. So how interesting that he gets caught in that. So he has to work another 7 years for Rachel. In total, he actually has 4 wives, but Rachel and Leah are sister wives. And so it gets very dynamic inside of here. Verse 25, I believe, or verse 22 begins our printed text. It says, and God remembered Rachel. Now, when you see the word and, we talk about this often, that something has to happen before then. So what has happened? You've got to go back to the start of chapter 30, and you'll see that Rachel is in her feelings. She is not happy. We see the continuation of this dysfunctional family. It's no secret that Jacob favors Rachel over Leah. He loves one wife more than the other, but Leah is the wife who is bearing him children. But she wants Jacob's love more than anything. Rachel is the trophy wife, and she wants children. So again, her issue is that she has no children, and it is made worse by the fact that Leah has 4 children, and not just 4 children, but they are boys. And so we see jealousy and envy in play. And in the beginning, she actually rejoices when her sister has her first child, but along the way, something has changed. And that is the fact that Leah's favor is going up in the eyes of Jacob because she is bearing him sons. And sons in that day were looked upon favorably. It was a big thing when boys were born. There were parties thrown in their honor. And so Leah gives him children, but again, she wants her husband's love. These children, these boys are Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. And I give you the definitions of their names, which tell you more about that relationship between Leah and Jacob. And Rachel has no children, and this bothers her deeply. It's an embarrassment to her. It's a sign that she is disfavored because children meant having God's favor. And when she explains this to Jacob, his response, he wasn't the loving and supportive husband. He gets angry with her. I think we see that in verse 2, and he says, "Am I God? Am I the one who refused you babies?" In other words, he says, this is not my issue. He's explaining, my game is clearly working. Look over in the other tent. I got 4 boys. My game is clearly on. So it's not me that's the problem. So Rachel has a plan of her own. Again, we see here human effort being exerted to fix a God problem. And we saw this exact same storyline with Sarah. It is Rachel's big idea to give Jacob her maiden, who is Bilhah. Bilhah was given to her by her father when she got married. And she offers Bilhah as more or less a surrogate mother to have a child with Jacob. And she planned then to adopt that child as her own. This is Ishmael and Hagar all over again. And so Bilhah actually has 2 sons. They are Dan and Naphtali. And Leah looks and sees that, she is not going to be outdone by Rachel. She then offers up her maid, who is Zilpah. Again, she received her handmaiden at the time of her marriage to Jacob as well. And she gives her maiden up because she is at the point that she has stopped having children. And so this maid then has 2 sons who are Gad and Asher. Now, surely at some point in your life, a child has come running from the outside and said, "I picked flowers for you," and they were dandelions. But in this story, Reuben, the oldest son of Leah, is out in the field, and he comes back and he's bought mandrakes for his mother. Rachel sees that Leah has mandrakes and she asks for some. And at this point, everything that she's been sitting on, it's like a pot waiting to boil, finally bubbles up. These mandrakes are here and everyone wants the mandrakes. So what are mandrakes? First of all, they were a rare plant. So she has something that is valuable. They are found in the Middle East. They have blue flowers in the winter, yellow and plum-like fruit in the summer. But what was most important is that they were desirable in this culture because of a belief or sort of a superstition that it was both an aphrodisiac and had the ability to promote fertility. So think about each one of these women. You've got one wife who wants her husband's love and affection, aphrodisiac, and you have another wife who wants children, fertility. So there's this rare fruit, value, and each woman wants it. But again, it belongs to Leah. She has possession of it. So there is this tension among the wives. And now here's Rachel asking for something, and Leah's thinking, oh, so now you want to share. Here's her issue bubbling up. Apparently, Jacob has not been intimate with her in a while. He's been over there with Rachel. And so now it's, oh, you want to share. Now, it's not enough that you've taken my husband. Now you want to take some of my son's mandrakes. And so Leah basically now plays let's make a deal. She says, you've got mandrakes and that's what I want. So I tell you what, you give me mandrakes and I'll let you sleep with Jacob tonight. So when Jacob returns from the field, he's been out working hard. Leah informs him, you've got to read this. This was not seductive. She wasn't working up to anything. She informs him that he must be with her that night. And he's got to be with her because she has paid a price for him. I played let's make a deal for you, and I'm getting what's behind door number 1. So she gave up her son's mandrakes for this night, this romantic night, if you will, with Jacob. She says to him, I paid a price for this. And that night, the Bible tells us that God heard Leah's prayer. Apparently, she's been petitioning God for more children, specifically another son. And we learn that she conceives and bears a 5th son, who is Issachar. She again conceives later and bears a 6th son, who is Zebulon. And then there is a 7th child, and she kind of gets honorable mention because, again, girls don't get the party, but that was the Dinah. That then brings us up to our printed text where we find out that God remembered Rachel. At this point, the score is basically Leah 6, Rachel 0. But God remembers Rachel even in her underdog position. After the mandrakes of the field did not work, it was God who moved for Rachel, and he allowed her to conceive a son. She names her son Joseph, and we do know that Joseph will dominate most of the balance of Genesis. The next 11 chapters we'll see Jacob, and he ultimately becomes a leader. He's got a lot that goes on in his life, but he ultimately becomes a leader. She says that the Lord, not the mandrakes, will add another son to me. Note that. It's very important. I highlighted that the Lord, this isn't all he's going to do. He's not going to stop here, but the Lord is going to add another son to me. Note here that her dependence, her relationship with God has been elevated. In verses 25 through 28, Jacob now is ready to leave Haran. He wants to go back home, and he expresses his desire to leave to Laban. Now remember, he was only supposed to come to Haran as a temporary escape. His mother said, go there until your brother cools off. Wait till, his anger simmers down, and then you can come back. And he goes there to work, and he starts to work for his uncle Laban. And he's worked hard for him. He worked basically 14 years for free in exchange for these two wives. And now he's ready to go home. He says, give me my wives and my children. Notice that Jacob doesn't ask for anything material. He doesn't even ask for a provision. He's willing to move because you've got to remember that he has something more valuable. He has a promise from God. God has promised Jacob that he would be with him. Last week's lesson. And Laban is a selfish father-in-law, a selfish employer even. And his response was, please don't go. It's the baby, baby, please speech. Don't go. He knew that Jacob was good for business. He said that he had learned it through divine inquiry. Some translations will tell you that it was through divination because Laban was not a believer in God. He worshiped idol gods. And he says, through a divine inquiry, I actually know what I know. He uses God's name, but remember, he believes in many gods. He says, though, that I am blessed because of your presence. I am blessed because you're here. He recognized that Jacob's God was real. Jacob's life was evident that God was real. And Laban knew that because Jacob was just like Laban. When he first met him, he recognized there's something in you that's just like me. And despite all of that, despite the things about them that were alike, that weren't so redeeming, God was with Jacob, and Laban knew that. So he asked him, name your price. What is it and I will pay you? Now again, Jacob is connected to the promise made to his grandfather Abraham, that his seed would be both blessed and they would be a blessing. So here is Jacob, who where he is has been a blessing. And one of my ahas is wherever we are, we should be a blessing. And this is not the first name your price offer that Laban has offered to Jacob. So for all sorts of reasons, he should have been suspicious. Remember, that didn't work out so well with getting Leah in the bedchamber. So I also noted that Jacob was an environment changer, and I called him a thermostat and not a thermometer. He did not simply register temperature where he was, but he set the temperature. He set the tone, and they knew that he was a productive individual. And in our workplaces, we too should be people who change the environment when we show up, and we are to be productive people in our workplaces. Verses 29 and 30 give us Jacob's response. He basically feels that he has the upper hand in bargaining power at this point. And he says, I know that I have value. I know it and you know it. The Message Bible says it this way: you know well what my work has meant to you and how your livestock have flourished under my care. The little you had when I arrived has increased greatly. So I've been a difference maker by being here. He's explaining that you have profited. I have given and you have profited. And now I'm simply wanting to do what's right for my family. I've neglected them. In blessing you, I haven't taken care of them. And it's time that I do something for my family. In verses 31 and 32, Laban again is saying, name your price. What do I need to give you? So here was Jacob's price. It's kind of interesting. He says, give me some of your flock versus payment or a wage. And here were the deal terms that Jacob lays out. He says, let me go through your flock and let me sort out the perfect or the purebred from the imperfect. And the imperfect would be those that were spotted or speckled or the black sheep. So purebred goats would be black and purebred lambs would be white. and Jacob would take the ones that were considered of lesser value, the spotted or the black ones. Here's the issue. You've got two men who are known as tricksters, as con artists, trying to make a deal with each other. And quite frankly, there are trust issues. Neither one of them can truly trust the other one. And so Jacob tells Laban that, hey, you can check my work after we sort through, and that's how you can check my honesty. Now, our lesson text skips down to verse 43, but you cannot skip all of the information in between, because verse 43 tells us, and the man being Jacob, increased exceedingly and had much cattle and maidservants and men servants and camels and asses. But how did Jacob become very rich when he didn't ask for any money? How did he have so many possessions? Well, again, the non-printed text gives us the answer. And that's that Laban agrees to Jacob's deal terms. Although he does not trust Jacob, as a matter of fact, Laban actually goes through and he's the one who does the division between the speckled and the spotted goats and the black sheep. And he gives those to be under the care of his sons. And then he gives Jacob his flock, and he puts a distance between them of 3 days' journey. He does not want there to be any opportunity for these flocks to be mixed. Jacob does tend to the flock of Laban. He tends to the flock of purebreds. And any sheep or goats that are born in between, if they're spotted, they're sent to the other herd. If spotted ones happen to produce purebreds, by some, who knows how that happens, but they would go back to the flock that Jacob was tending. But then Jacob does something very interesting. Now remember, he's always the man with a plan. And this one, I don't know, I read lots of commentary on it, but it's interesting. He basically gets branches, and they're branches from certain trees, and he peels them back. And it's most likely a superstition in breeding. But when the flocks went to drink and they mated, his the flock of purebred sheep and goats actually produced speckled and spotted. So they were all sent over to the other flock. And then Jacob, the breeder now, takes these speckled and spotted animals and he only mates them with dark animals. So they continue to produce these speckled and spotted animals. And so he basically creates a distinctive flock for himself. And ultimately, it is Laban who ends up with the more feeble animals, and Jacob who has the stronger animals, although speckled and spotted, for himself. And so that's where his wealth, his increased value comes from in verse 43. That's the end of our printed text and the end of our lesson. I do want to share my key learnings from this week. The first is that God does not need our help fixing problems. Human effort does not solve God-sized problems. But God comes through not when we demand that he comes through, not when we necessarily tell him that we want him, but he comes through in his own time. He makes a decision about time and the right time. Our job is to let God work. The second thing is that we have to deal with our own issues, and we have to watch that frustration doesn't build over time. The Bible tells us that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So if you think about the things that Rachel said to Leah and the things that Leah said to Rachel, that wasn't just in that moment about mandrakes. That was things that they had stewed over a period of time. And we've got to be careful because the root of bitterness is so real. And each of us has to deal with that. I had a situation in my life earlier this year, and there was something that happened, and in my mind, I kept thinking about it. And as time went on and other things happened, it took me back to this same place. And before I knew it, I had certain feelings about an individual that I had to deal with, and ultimately go to that person and talk about it and say, you know, when that happened, it didn't make me feel good. And everything else that happened subsequently became a layer. And so we've got to be careful. We've got to watch what's in our hearts because it spurs our action. And we've got to learn to talk about our deeper issues and not simply say, no, nothing's wrong. Hey, what's going on with you? Nothing, I'm okay. No, you're not. Learn to talk about issues constructively. Next, be careful about putting children in the middle of adult issues. Notice that these women basically made children weapons to be used against each other. And we should never make children a part of a competition, not for anyone's affection or for any other reason. Out of a bad situation, God can bring great blessings. We've talked about the fact that at this point, nothing in Jacob's life has been overly redeeming. We've always known him as a con artist and a trickster, and yet he has the blessing of God, and God is able to produce things in his life. And then look at Rachel's life. Out of a situation that seems barren, it seems fruitless, God is still able to produce great blessings. Her son Joseph would be a great blessing. God can help us even in difficult situations. In our workplaces, we see Jacob dealing with his father-in-law, but he's also his employer. And for all technical purposes, Laban fails miserably in the employment engagement or employment satisfaction survey. But God can help us when our work conditions aren't positive. God can help us when we have tough managers. God can help us through tough conversations when we have to talk with our managers about things. God can help us even in difficult work situations. Our lives should be a reflection of God. Every day we should walk in such a way that people recognize God in us, and our interactions should cause others to see God in us and point to the fact that God is real. His presence in our lives, his power should be undeniable. We are to be salt, presence, and light in the world. I say often that every day that we leave our homes, we have the opportunity to represent or represent Christ in all that we do. Finally, the world should benefit from your presence. You should be an environment changer. You are not just a thermometer, you are a thermostat. You don't simply register temperature around you and acclimate to everything that's around you, but you change the temperature for God when you show up. This is our lesson for this week. Again, I look forward to any additional points that you may have gained in the lesson. I'll add them to my notes if you leave me comments down below on your learnings. I appreciate you for being here. Don't forget to thumbs up, like this video if it's been helpful. Share it with someone. Let's get on our journey to 2 million. Don't forget to order your TSSG scarf. That's it. I appreciate you all for being here. I love you all so much. I will see you in Sunday school. I don't even have a voice anymore. Bye, everybody.